Hi, my name is Janine Janini, and today I'm going to be chatting to you about brain spotting, and I'm going to do my best to explain to you what it is, how it happens, and what you can possibly expect. This process is highly experiential, so a presentation or a theoretical explanation really doesn't do it justice. It's like going to visit a most beautiful spot in the world. You're never going to get the full experience via photograph. You really have to go and experience this for yourself. But I'm going to do my best. So let's get going, and I'll do my best to try and explain brain spotting to you. First things first is brain spotting was developed by Dr. David Grant, who's a clinical social worker. He's written various books. He's got a book on brain spotting, and he does seminars and trainings all over the world. He has worked on very significant situations and events that have happened in the world. For example, 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, working with people who have suffered PTSD from these events. He has used brain spotting highly effectively in these cases. His development of brain spotting really started through his knowledge and his experience using EMDR or eye movement desensitization. And he's, he was working with a client, an ice skater, which he describes in the book that you can see here on the slide. And he was working with her eye movement using his finger and asking her to track his finger while they were processing a significant traumatic fall that she had during her during her career. And he noticed that the eye had a very specific reflexive response at different points where his finger was while she was tracking it. And this made him realize that the eyes form an instrumental function in how one processes events and even stores information and memories. And this was the very beginning of brain spotting. If you're interested to know exactly how then he built the process of brain spotting and various case studies that he's worked on, I highly recommend getting David's book, Brain Spotting. So, there are different approaches when working with clients, whether it be coaching, counseling, or therapy, for example. And there are two main approaches that one can break different methodologies into a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. Now, I'm going to explain both of these and how brain spotting is a bottom-up approach. So I just want to give a little background on the brain first and how it develops in utero. Our brains, when in utero, actually start developing from the brain stem first. So, the part of the brain that actually connects the brain into the rest of your nervous system and into your spinal cord. This is the first part of the brain to develop in utero. And a lot of people also, you might hear this being called the reptilian brain. The second part of our brain to develop in utero is the limbic system. Now, the limbic system has all to do with emotions, memories, and habits. And the last part of our brain to grow in utero, but also from an evolutionary aspect, is our thinking brain or the neocortex, which is this top layer here. If you can just follow the cursor. The neocortex has all to do with thinking, analyzing, decision making, and language. So when an approach in therapy or coaching or any kind of processing engages the neocortex first, we call this a top-down approach. So top of your brain, going down into the brainstem and into your body. Now, this part of the brain, because it is thinking and reasoning, it doesn't necessarily easily bring about behavior change. Behavior change is really subcortical, all those parts of the brain below the neocortex. So your limbic system, as well as the brain stem and those structures. that are part of that subcortical region. And why we say this is in the subcortical region, this is where trauma is stored, where the brain works with memories, stores memories, and works with emotion. And this is where behavior change takes place. So talk therapy, for example, or CBT are approaches that are top down, really engaging the neocortex first. Now, there can be some issues with bringing about behavior change effectively using top-down approaches. And why we say this is because this is a logical, conscious decision-making part of the brain. It has very little to do with emotion, with that fight, flight, freeze response, or with survival itself. And when somebody is in a survival mode, when we are activated from a traumatic event or feeling very unsafe, the subcortical part of the brain literally hijacks this top part of the brain. And additional resources come to the subcortical part in order to protect you for survival ultimately. So when one is triggered, it is very difficult to really engage this neocortical part of the brain. Also, information tends to flow from the body and the subcortical parts of the brain upwards into the neocortical brain rather than the information flowing from the neocortex down into the subcortex and into the body. So what brain spotting really does, the goal of brain spotting is to bypass the thinking conscious brain, your neocortex, to get to those deeper parts of the brain and the body where behavior change takes place, where those parts of the body and brain that are involved with survival can be engaged, and those parts of the brain can be healed and really allow those parts of the brain to really fully process events, traumas, and experiences that might be triggering the person into a survival response. So brain spotting is a bottom-up approach. It really engages the lower parts of the brain, however, then allowing that information to come up into the neocortical parts of the brain. Now, if you can look on this part of the diagram, here's our eye, and you can see how it extends into the brain. The eye isn't just connected to the brain, it is literally an extension of the brain. And so the eye position gives access to stored trauma in those lower parts of the brain, which I'm going to explain in more detail in our next slide. So in order to explain this to you, I want to try and demonstrate to you a brain spot. What is a brain spot? So first I'm going to ask you a question. And while I'm talking on this slide, while I'm asking you a question, etc., I want you to also watch my eyes and see how I process with the position of my eyes. But first I'm going to ask you a question to see if you can find your own brain spot. So let me think of a question. So depending when you're looking at this presentation, I'm just going to say to you, a week back from today, can you remember what you had for lunch? A week ago today. Now, a lot of you might say, oh no, I don't remember, and not try and process the question. I really want you to indulge me here and think back as best you can to get a most detailed answer that you can with what you had, around what you had for lunch a week ago. I'm going to give you just a bit of time to really think about it. And even if you want to, if you've got a pen and paper with you, you might want to jot it down. It's not necessary, but just be mindful of what comes up for you or what you had for lunch. Okay. Now, most of you will have some kind of idea or at least some kind of plausible detail on what you maybe had for lunch, whether it was soup or a sandwich, or a salad, whatever it might be. You have some kind of idea of what you might have had for lunch. Now, I want you to think about how you got to that conclusion around the details that you had. You might have linked a few things, like where you might have been on that particular day, who you might have been with. Perhaps you'll remember if you had lunch out or at home or at the office. And all these things are clues that your brain looks for to find the answers to what you had for lunch. Now, what you might have also found, if you really think hard, is as your brain was looking for this information, that your eyes were part of this process. If you want, you can even look back at this recording, and while I was thinking of a question, you would see how I looked up to find a relevant question that most of you would probably have had to think about. Now, that is a brain spot. And while you were thinking about all these things to try and get to an answer, your eyes might have been moving in all different parts of the room. And when your brain started connecting to a spot that was giving you the right kind of information, you might have found that you locked in on that spot. So I know when I was looking for a question or thinking of a question to ask you, I know I looked up, at my ceiling, and then when I had an answer, I came back to you. Now that is a brain spot. So in brain spotting, we use the location of your eyes to find where the eye is looking, a location, a point in space that the eye is looking at, to where it correlates with where the information can be accessed in your brain. So your eyes, David Graham says, also where your eyes look affect how you feel. So now you can imagine if we are processing, that is something quite emotional, emotionally charged, or even traumatic, and you think about that thing, it can actually become quite emotional. Now, in brain spotting, if we are processing something that is quite emotional, or sad, or that made you angry, or scared, what we'd do is we'd use the eye location. If you're looking to the left or the right, up or down, and find where the eye correlates the most with that emotion that might come up for you, or even simply where the thoughts or memories come back from that event most intensely. And now that is a brain spot, is a point in visual space that you as the client will have a strong reaction to, a strong correlation with whatever we are processing. Your eye will give reflective cues to where the information is stored in the brain. So a trained practitioner, while looking for a spot, helping you find a spot, will look at the reflective cues your eyes are giving. So a trained practitioner might work with a pointer. We don't always work with a pointer, but very often we do, to help your eyes track and help you find a spot. But also once we have found a spot, so say we are moving our pointer along this way, and suddenly you say, oh, I can feel that emotion really strongly in my stomach when I look at the pointer here. That would then be a spot. And I would hold the pointer in this place for you to keep looking at while you are processing. And all then you need to do is to keep looking at the pointer. Nothing else is actually required of you, because the brain and all the information in the event is actually processing while your eye is looking here, because it is a point in space that is connecting the brain and the eye position so that can process more fully. So I'm going to take the pointer down. Pointer itself is not necessarily significant. One could look at something in the room, for example. It is there to help your eye stay in one position, to give your brain and the body the necessary time and space to process. Because when our lives are so busy, we don't often take the time to process fully. Or during a trauma, while the trauma is actually happening, or while we are feeling traumatized, we do not necessarily give our brain and body the time to heal. Our brain and our body can naturally heal and naturally wire. And all that we're doing in brain spotting is enhancing that ability. So The other thing that is super important in our brain spotting process is a thing called dual attunement. So let me explain a little bit what that means. So our brain has mirroring neurons, which respond to the actions we see in others. Mirroring neurons are thought to be highly involved with giving and receiving empathy. So let me think of an example. See, I did a brain spot. My eyes quickly went up. So, if you notice and you do these questions with other people, you'll be able to see how their eyes move. And those are demonstrating brain spots. So off point, but let me come back to dual attunements. Okay. Have you ever walked into a room or a party or a boardroom for that matter, and you can pick up the atmosphere immediately as you walk in? You know that saying of you can cut the tension with a knife? This is where the saying comes from, is we are able, with mirroring neurons and neuroception, that's another concept I can explain at another time, where your body is able to pick up what is happening in your environment from different tones, body language, energy, etc. And when we work in brain spotting, what is really important is that your trained practitioner will create a safe space. So instead of a boardroom that is feeling icy cold, part of our brain spotting is to create a really warm, safe, calm space from which you can process. And why this is so important is that while your nervous system is mirroring and your brain is mirroring with the practitioner, it allows your brain and your nervous system to rewire and process whatever you are looking at from a different perspective, from a safer, calmer perspective, which is probably completely different from how you experienced this past event that we are looking to change. Now, we don't usually go back and want to change happy, fantastic events. So you're probably working with your practitioner something that was quite upsetting or difficult, that or changed your behavior in such a way that you didn't like. So this creating this dual attunement is very important in brain spotting, so that your brain rewires and your body rewires, your nervous system is allowed to find a place of safety. Also, when your body and your brain feel safe, it is far easier for your brain not to be in survival mode, and hence process these events, process these limiting behaviors and behavior patterns that you want to change far more quickly and easily, rather than from an activated space. But even if you are activated in that subcortical region, we are actually able to access that activation and change it by also using the dual attunement, where your body is using the calm, safe space from the other person, co-regulating with the other person in this space to bring about a sense of calmness. So all this is also using the brain's neuroplasticity to rewire these events and traumas that you might be working on to bring relief um, and change and transformation. So we create capacity as well in the nervous system. We don't just simply rewire it for safety, but what brain spotting also allows is a release of tension and stress, and also to create a widening. Let's put my hands this way. So if our nervous system is seen as a container, let's see it as the space between my hands. And if your nervous system is say quite narrow and doesn't have a lot of capacity, it might look like this. And so you're going to struggle to deal with a lot of stress or stepping out of your comfort zone. But what brain spotting allows the nervous system to do is also expand its window of tolerance and its capacity. So more can flow through your nervous system and get those traumatic events to flow and move. But also on a daily basis, you have more space to flow through this nervous system of yours. Thereby doing it also creates a flexible nervous system, one that can move up and down, be more mobilized and being more relaxed, better, so that you are not stuck on in a survival mode, in a fight or flight, and you are not stuck off in a state of freeze or dissociation, because these extremes are never moving off these survival states. is not a healthy place for your nervous system to be. So brain spotting helps your nervous system to become flexible and respond appropriately to the different events that are happening during your day. You know, if you're coming up to do a presentation, you need to be more mobilized. You need to be awake and on the ball, and your brain needs to be thinking actively. However, when you're on your lunch break, or maybe when you go home, you need your nervous system to calm down so that you can actually relax, switch off, de-stress. And so your nervous system needs to move throughout the day. Now, brain spotting is a fantastic tool to create capacity, but also to create flexibility. Part of our brain spotting process is also to use bilateral music, which stimulates both left and right hemispheres of the brain, so that your whole brain is involved in processing. Now, the music is not absolutely essential every single time. Some people maybe don't enjoy it, or maybe just don't have access at that point. Maybe they've forgotten their earphones. So it is not absolutely necessary, but it can be highly beneficial while doing brain spotting to help both brains, left and right hemispheres, to be completely involved in the process. So let's look at what brain spotting can be used for. Now, actually, brain spotting can be used for anything. It is so versatile and it is so adaptive. It can be used for anything. But because I work with and in the space of brain coaching and with business leaders and entrepreneurs, I have listed what I most commonly use brain spotting for. So anxiety and panic is one of the most prolific issues that I do see, even with highly successful people. So we work a lot with anxiety. It is highly effective with things like anxiety and past traumas. So a lot of people might say to me, you know, why are we going back in the past? You know, these traumatic things I haven't thought about for 10 years or even 20 years. Why are we working on them? And the thing is, because trauma can actually change our behavior patterns and our survival thinking of the brain, it is always a good idea to go and make sure that past traumas, if there are any, are processed fully so that we are not indirectly triggered within our working day, within our business. So some people, for example, might find that at certain points, they can be quite controlling or rigid, or you know, sort of feel that certain people get them triggered in their environment. These are very often because of past experiences and past traumas. We work a lot with money mindsets, around past generational negative money mindsets that we might have got from our caregivers, society, or parents for that matter. You know, wanting more money is greedy. And if you are looking to earn more, then it means you are ungrateful. You know, that sort of thing is not uncommon when working with business leaders, you know, or, you know, feeling that they need to justify what they spend their money on, um, fears that while you are doing so well that you might eventually out earn your partner and that it might change the dynamic of your relationship or cause conflict. These are all things around money mindset that I have successfully worked on. Um, you know, sports for performance and acting is a big thing that I work on as well. You know, not everybody has an office type job. And so sports and acting performances are work as well. And it is a wonderful tool and process to enhance your sports performance and to enhance your acting. Now, even in the business world, you know, enhancing how you do your presentations, how you are in the boardroom, how you might present to clients. It is a fantastic way to enhance performance all around. We also look at opening up creative blocks, reducing a general stress, which a lot of us have on a day-to-day basis, which can keep our cortisol levels higher than perhaps they should be, which isn't healthy for our brain and body. We work extensively on limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, procrastination, those sorts of things. Low self-esteem, fear of public speaking is a big one, which is something brain spotting usually sorts out very quickly. Changing ineffective behavioral patterns, things like I've mentioned, perfectionism, procrastination, being overly accommodating, feel like you need to people please, you know, especially if you have staff to manage, and it might be quite difficult when you have to put your foot down and you have to put in strong boundaries. And then last but not least, which is I see as the foundation of most of my work, is regulating and grounding the nervous system. And like I said, creating that capacity in your nervous system, which I feel is a foundation for everybody. The more our nervous system holds, the more we feel safe, the more we feel grounded, the better we are able to show up in our everyday lives, both on our personal capacity and our business capacity. So these are just some of the things that I see on a regular basis that I use brain spotting for. Like I say, this list is not exhaustive. Right, so how can you work with me? I have numerous one-to-one packages and containers that my clients work with me in. And at the moment, these are 2, 4, and 6 months. Now, these might change in a little bit of time, but at the moment, that's where they are. And we have various reasons for working in different time brackets, depending on how much support you need, what you're working on, or if you just simply want to lean into long-term support. I also have various workshops and group courses that I run at various times of the year, as well as a variety of complementary resources, which include things like non-sleep deep rest protocol or yoga nidra, various hypnosis and nervous system regulating techniques, as well as some talks and presentations which might be freely available for you as well. So these are all available across different platforms, YouTube being one of them, as well as Instagram. And what I do is I'm going to ask you and encourage you to contact me for more information on the one-to-one containers, as well as whatever workshops that I am currently running. My email is here, Janine at LTP Brain-Based Coaching. I'm very active on Instagram, and in my bio link, you'll find access to most of my complimentary work. And then with YouTube, some of the longer talks and presentations are available there. So depending where you have access this talk, you might be able to find me on different platforms. Thank you so much for joining me in listening to what brain spotting is. I highly encourage you though to experience brain spotting because it is a process that is highly experiential, as well as somatic. So really bringing in the nervous system and the body. Please give me a shout if you would like an experience around brain spotting or any additional questions that you might have. Thank you very much for joining me today.